Your parents were saying to you, you guys were lazy.
Exactly.
And you now saying, I'm lazy, and I'll probably
Passing
say
it on.
Gen Alpha is lazy.
Yes,
You know?
yeah.
If you are not spending and investing in your personal brand, the opportunity cost, you are literally throwing away money.
But how does Marko Stavrou deal with success and failures? Hi everyone, and welcome to another People Desk podcast episode. Today with me, I have an incredibly successful young entrepreneur, and I kind of want to say, I guarantee after this episode, you are going to feel that you should have subscribed for that MBA at the beginning of this year, or there's going to be something in you that's going to say, man, I just need to be doing a little bit more with my time. And without further ado, I want to do a little bio on my guest here, and then I'm going to do a formal introduction. So our guest here today is an entrepreneur, a strategist, and a keynote speaker. Get this, he started his business and his podcast at the age of 14 and later left high school to pursue his dream full-time, whilst being the youngest to be accepted into the Genlink Business School. Today, age 21, he serves as the founder and the CEO of Genlink, an investor-based consulting and insights firm focused on unlocking potential and organizations' next-generation talent and customers, which is what we want to focus on today. But his lifelong ambition is to invest in the growth of African businesses, whilst also empowering entrepreneurs and leaders to lead more purposeful and fulfilling lives, which is just amazing. So without further ado, meet Marko Stavrou. Marko Stavrou, the Gen Z guy.
Thank you so much for having me, Vaughan. It's such a privilege, and you have such a beautiful home and setup.
You are, and you're you're natural at this. You know, this is what you do every day. We're going to be learning quite a lot from you today, and I must just say, really inspirational. You know, I had a look at your bio, and I can see, I know you are in the limelight. You know, you're doing amazing things, but there's a core value to you. I can see you want to help people. You know, you want to help, especially entrepreneurs going through what you're going through, and super excited to be sharing some insights with you. So.
Well, thank you for giving me your platform, and absolutely, you know, one of the reasons I create content, and I actually really dislike social media. I don't want to be on social media, but I really just wish that there was someone in South Africa that was young, that I could have looked up to when I was 14, sitting in high school and thinking, I'm the only one who has these aspirations, and why do I feel so lonely, and why do I feel like there's no one to help me? And, you know, my parents were in the medical field, so they weren't entrepreneurs. My grandparents were entrepreneurs. They were in Greece and not with me, unfortunately. And so I just want to be that person to the youth, and whether any age group. And I just feel South Africans need to collaborate more and need to come together and share our beautiful stories. And so, thank you for providing that platform.
It's like you're speaking through a lens, and it's giving us insight in that lens. You know, I think from an HR perspective, you know, we see employees from various demographics and from various backgrounds and from various generations coming together, creating a culture and creating magic. And it's not just one generation that thrives, you know, it's that combination. And I suspect or anticipate our audience has this, I don't want to say fear is maybe a very hard word, but this uncertainty of, whoa, what's coming? You know, do I understand how to manage this generation coming in? And more so now, it's being in public. I mean, you've got your podcast, you speak openly about what the experiences and expectations of Gen Zs are. And I sometimes get the sense that other generations might be apprehensive or a little bit defensive towards it. Is it what you've seen more or less?
Yeah, I think, look, there's so much uncertainty in the world, and the world is changing so fast with AI and technology. And I think we all have a bit of anxiety and anxiousness, you know. So it's not to say that it's solely one generation or group, but it's all of us that are facing that. And, you know, one of the things I speak about is between 2010 and 2015, there was something called the Great Rewire, where literally young people's brains physically changed because of technology, social media, and overprotective parenting. So a lot of parents actually speak to me and say, Marko, you know, our kids don't know what to do with their lives, or let's say are studying law but can't find a job. Can you help us provide certainty and more clarity? And I think, you know, that's where personal mastery and Genlink Business School came into my life at such a powerful way, because this self-awareness to ask reflective questions and to have conversations like this. You know, I've had coffee with over 150 strangers, people that had no identity of who they were to people that I was actually reaching out and meeting. And just through those conversations, you learn so much about life, but also about yourself. And so, I really implore people from all generations to start having the conversation and start coming to more events. And that's one of the things why I'm really trying to invest back into Africa, both from a eventing point of view. I mean, there's a South African Future Trust Summit coming out next week, 5th and 6th of November. The Oppenheimers have invested millions into kind of growing and curating a space for entrepreneurship in South Africa, because we just don't have that compared to the Silicon Valleys or the Londons. And so, yeah.
Is it, I mean, and you're starting this journey only. It's only 21. I mean, you've been busy for many years. Do you find it intimidating having to speak as an expert or as an advisor in front of audiences where people have had 40 years? If I take our chairman, Altman has seen it all. Yet you're starting this journey. Do you find it intimidating, or how do you manage that?
Definitely. There's a lot of imposter syndrome and doubt that I have to work through, because at the same point as I have an expert, like you said, I'm literally just starting out, and I know nothing about life and business yet. I think what I've been very good at is to only speak on things that I've either done or I can speak about, which is why the whole Gen Z guy and the Gen Z angle is so apparent. Because it's very authentic to who I am and me being 21 years old. And so I really try and stay away from, let's say, giving advice on investing or giving advice on building businesses, because I'm literally just starting, So I'm very, very conscious of that. At the same time, the world has changed so much, Vaughan, because of globalization, because of technology. I've been exposed to information and systems and opportunities like never before. So if we compare it to my grandparents' generation, where capital and where they were located was their limitation. For me, there are no limitations, because I can interview people in America, I can make investments, I can get investors, I can have clients all over the world. And so the world has changed so dramatically that I think that a 21-year-old can have something to say now if they have the actionable items and the backing to do so. So there's a lot of young people, unfortunately, that are just shouting from the roofs and driving in all these cars that are rented and showing, money as the biggest thing in their life. And I think that's absolutely the wrong narrative to be addressing. And so it's a very fine balance that I'm trying to work out.
It's authentic is what I've seen you, and I just love that about you. I think that's where I wanted to go with that question. We see in social media, there's almost like this kind of fake it.
Correct. Fake it till you make it. Absolutely.
Exactly. Where you come in with an authentic voice and a background and saying, listen, guys, I almost want to bridge this gap, and I want to take you through the lens of your new generation coming in and fast track you so that we can get this right very quickly.
I'm very, very okay with being vulnerable. I'm very, very okay with being raw and saying when I've done something wrong. And everything I do is just led by curiosity. It's never been about the money for me. It's never been about the fame or the success. It's solely been about, I want to learn something and extract information. And that's where it all started. When I was walking to tennis, I used to play very good tennis at St. Stithians, the high school that I went to, and I would just be listening to podcasts. And, no one else in any of my grades was doing that,
No, not at all.
And they did start certain businesses, but it was so short-term incentivized to just make money. And for me, it was never about that. And I think that's why I've been able to sustainably do it day in, day out, literally, like you said, for the past 5-6 years. Go to events every week, come and show up to podcasts, invest in relationships, invest in building a business. And so it's a very important element that if you don't love something and if you don't have a sustainable viewpoint on it, you won't succeed.
Not at all. We're getting very serious now, and I wanted to do a proper introduction with you as well. Take me through Genlink. So Genlink, obviously being founder and CEO, what do you guys do with Genlink?
Cool. So I was a client at a Standard Bank event, and I was just an attendee, and one of the executives came up to me afterwards, and I was actually interviewing them for the podcast, and I said, do you mind if I could just do an interview for our publication and our podcast? And she said, wow, that's impressive, I'd love to.
Wow.
And then she said to me, by the way, none of the clients here at this event are here because they have a relationship with their relationship managers or the bank. It's solely because their parents have got the relationship. Can you help us fix that? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I've got a background in marketing. I was studying at Henley Business School. Let's have breakfast and tea. So she invited me to the headquarters in Rosebank. We had breakfast and literally came up with a kind of a plan to design these Future Leader Academy events. So a series of events where we had speakers, where we had engagements, where we had fun things. We changed the communication to the clients.
Okay.
And that was literally how I formed Stavrou Consulting, the PTY Limited.
No way.
And from that point on, just one step after another, spoke at events, reached out to events. And again, because I was the youngest person always attending these events, they were like, oh, we need help connecting to the youth. Oh, the same problem kept on coming up. And so I've always said to entrepreneurs, you don't decide whether you start a business, the market decides. The market decides whether it's valuable. Sometimes we think our ideas are so valuable. If the market's not prepared to pay for it and engage with it, then it's not.
Not valuable.
And so that was the first kind of iteration of the business. And then because I raised money last year from Man-Made Media and Buffett Investments and Murray Legg, who's a very successful media entrepreneur, I forced to kind of change the name and get my name out of it. And that's why we went with Genlink, linking generations.
Love that.
And then the whole premise of the business is how do we become your next gen partner and bridge the gap between your talent and your customers when it comes to the youth. And so, we use data. We've got a platform where we run surveys and then also strategy and workshops and masterclasses for those two elements.
And I got caught with your client-focused material, where you spoke about marketing and sales for this generation, and then ventured into the HR elements. But it's the same. It's you're also selling employment, and you're also selling a brand.
Work readiness stuff.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah. Are we going to see lots happening in this market or in this space? In terms of what you're doing, but just formally. If I look at universities, learnerships, tertiary educations, you are essentially setting that platform for us to say, guys, we've got to be talking about all of this. Do you think that they'll follow suit?
Absolutely. So we're already seeing, if I did Cambridge A-levels for my matriculant year at a study center, the whole structure of education is changing.
Yeah.
So if we look at what, Advitex and the Vegas and the different online schooling systems are coming up with, it's a very different type of education, one that's very practical. So we're moving away from very theoretical because we can find that now in ChatGPT.
Anywhere,
right?
exactly.
Anywhere. So what's more important are skills like negotiation, public speaking, conflict management, systems thinking, personal mastery. Those are the type of elements and kind of learnings that both companies and education need to now start imparting in young people. And so I do a lot of work with universities and all different organizations.
Yeah. Is it filling a gap that's been created, or is it supplementing whatever we have? And why I asked that question, I spoke to a teacher the other day where she spoke about the impact of COVID, especially with grade 9s and grade 11s and 12s, and how they're seeing it at the university level now at this moment. Is what you do, is it filling a gap that was created for whatever reason, or is it supplementing? It's changed so much, we've got to think differently.
I think it's both. So I think that firstly, I don't believe that the generational differences are as great as we make them out to be. So sometimes we're like, Gen Z is so different. Human beings are human beings, and so your parents were saying to you, you guys were lazy.
Exactly.
And you now saying I'm lazy, and I'll probably say Gen Alpha's lazy.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of pattern recognition that we have to pick up on that it's not that different.
Yeah.
But then there's also major, what we call generational defining moments that happened in Gen Z's life that are very, very different. And that being the 2008 crash, technology, social media, the internet, AI, people being born now will not know a life without AI.
that. Yep.
And so that fundamentally changes the way they engage with the world. So I think there are some fundamental things. And like you're saying, there's a gap that the market's telling me, which is flip, these people think so differently and they act so differently, help us. But then there's also AI is changing the whole world, so how do we supplement that for all generations?
And it's either through influence, so whatever you're sharing is influencing all those platforms, or it might be like the other programs you're doing. It might be something like with Henley. I'm sure that there's quite a lot going on there as well. Is this your Standard Bank project? Is it something you can speak about? So I know you speak quite fondly about what you've been doing for Standard Bank.
Yeah, so look, it's just essentially they've got a product to a specific demographic and customer base, and it's literally how do we enhance that so that from all the front end marketing to the back end to the actual delivery is optimized for the youth.
Wow.
And so one of the things we speak about is TTF, time to fun. How long does it take for your product and service to actually go from when the customer engages with it to when they actually get what they came for, the fun part. And so one of our things we do is we spend time doing friction analysis. So auditing the process and seeing how long does it take, what friction points are there? Because Gen Z don't love email.
Okay.
They don't want to use email. They don't want to fill out a 20-page survey.
Okay.
They don't want to call someone to talk about their credit score. So a lot of it has to be digitized, and that's a lot of the type of work we're doing.
Cool. And is that experience, you're talking exactly where we're going now. We're obviously looking at recruitment, and we've chatted to Francois as well from WAM.
From WAM, yeah,
I
good
saw
friend
you
of
had
mine.
an excellent interview with him.
Yeah.
And one of the things I chatted to one of his associates that he did a previous podcast with, and one of the things we were chatting about is that with technology comes all these extra steps now. So you apply here, and then it's going to take you here, and now you're going to do a WAM interview, and that's going to take you there. Do you think that this has got to be much quicker? Do you think we've got to get to the point very quickly? And yes, this technology is great, but we have to simplify and streamline this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a very practical example is LinkedIn. So a lot of companies use LinkedIn as a channel, but you literally get hundreds of job applications. Now you have to sift through all of those. Half of them are not even applicable. And then once you do those, now you have to phone all the references. And so that whole process is why a Wamly exists, for the one-way interviews. And so I think that there's a lot of tools coming out that can escalate that process. And then also, for example, LinkedIn was solely a recruitment platform. Now it's a social platform.
Exactly.
So it's become a social media where people are engaging. I always often see people sharing when they get married. It's like so crazy to me that you would share that. But it's fundamentally changing. And that's why, I did a vitality kind of talk recently. And one of the things they said was, I asked one of the young guys, why do you work for Discovery? And he says, Marko, I don't work for Discovery.
Ooh,
I work for Adrian
Gore. Wow.
And so buying into these personal brands, and that's why we're seeing one of the trends and one of my predictions is that 99% of executives will have personal brands. Every corporate will have a podcast. So we've already seen Standard Bank launch their podcast. We've got people like Yolanda Cuba from MTN, massive presence on social media. We've got the CEO of Microsoft, massive presence online. Elon Musk, 260 million followers on Twitter.
Exactly.
He's got an endless pool of talent. And so they're using it now for commercial reasons. And I think that's very, very important for people listening. If you are not spending and investing in your personal brand, the opportunity cost, you are literally throwing away money. Now, a lot of older, mature business people and businesses say to me, Marko, we've got that. We don't need that. But I always say to them is what happens when the pipeline gets dry, So if we look at the Edcons, we look at the Lehman Brothers, you're never too big to fall.
Exactly.
And so you kind of almost have to adapt or die and fit it into the way you guys are doing it. So let's say the CEO doesn't want to have a podcast, get one of your employees to do it. Represent the brand, build an attachment towards it. And so I'm sure you'll start to see lots of opportunities from this.
And what you're saying is that Gen Zs are expecting this. This is where they're going to be looking at who's my next employer, where do I want to go invest my skills that I've acquired. And it's not necessarily going to be somebody that they haven't heard about. It's going to be who's in the market, who's sharing their knowledge.
The first thing they're going to go to is your social media.
Wow.
The first thing they're going to go to is your podcast. That is going to be a way that they see what your culture in the organization is like.
Okay.
So they're no longer going to come and job shadow. They're going to job shadow you online.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to audit you online. And so when you're not on TikTok and you don't even have a presence on LinkedIn, they're like, this company doesn't exist. These people aren't real.
Now I've got to test myself now, because I see, just quickly backtrack, you did some great research. When you and I did the introductions, we said data is so important. It's not just Marko's opinion or something, but Marko's backing this with data. You've got a survey running. If you can just give me a snapshot of what you're doing there.
So we did a survey that's going to be coming out shortly to 1,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 30. 500 were women, about 500 were men, and all different demographics and kind of LSM levels. Majority of them earning more than 9,000 Rand a month, all the way up to 80,000. And essentially what we found was that the average person between the ages of 18 and 30 spends more than 70% spend more than 5 hours a day on social media. And so again, it speaks to the point I'm making that literally if you're not using it for talent or for customer acquisition or just for even building touch points, you are losing market share every single day.
Even the platforms. So Facebook being number one, followed by TikTok, Instagram, and then X. So this tells me about my generation. I don't know about X. I was like, what? X? And then YouTube. I mean, if I can just speak about our efforts, we see LinkedIn as this platform. This is where you recruit. And what I'm reading from that is, wow, there's much more. You're going to have a presence and a touch point on all those different platforms. But it's so difficult. TikTok. I struggle to really take people seriously on TikTok. You know, in COVID, we had this, this whole spiel about force majeure and how's it going to, affect employment, and it was the forfeiture of leave. And there was this one guy that specifically spoke and gave legal advice on TikTok, and that's what stuck with me till now. So, but I mean, is that what's going to be required? You know, more.
So what's so interesting is the fastest demographic growing on LinkedIn is Gen Z.
Okay.
18 to 30.
Oh, okay.
The fastest demographic growing on TikTok is 35 to 55.
Wow.
So I was sitting in a real estate conference speaking to 250 people that are all over the age of 35. And I said, raise your hand
TikTok.
if you have a TikTok account.
No.
And most of them put up their hand.
Wow.
So we have this misconception, Vaughan, that TikTok is for 12-year-old girls dancing.
Yes.
And it's totally fundamentally changed over the last few years, where now more and more serious commercial content is being showcased. Everything from banking to FMCG to real estate to even conversations about depression, anxiety. And so, I think that it is such a missed opportunity for brands not to be organically using TikTok. When I say organically, it means sharing, engaging short-form content without paid advertising. Then once you have some very viral moments, putting ad spend behind those specific moments. Because if you're just putting ad spend behind very boring graphics that haven't been engaged with, no one's going to actually see that. And so a lot of my work is spending time with consumer-facing brands to say, your whole content strategy is wrong. It's so boring. It's so mundane. No one's engaging with it. Let's get a person behind the brand and start posting real, just document what you do. I like the word document. Don't sell. So, for example, if we're wanting to sell HR services and you're constantly speaking about HR, no one's going to take you seriously.
Wow.
But if you're using stories and experiences and walkthroughs and a day in the lives and podcasts to speak about it indirectly, then people will engage with the brand.
Value. That's it. And it's consistent with our advice from a marketing agency as well. We're very traditional. You know, we wanted to do write-ups on what do we do and everything. And they said, you've got to kind of mix it up a little bit. Even talking about multimedia, doing multimedia clips. But it's so difficult, it's almost by default you are wired to say, I'm not sure whether that would be appropriate.
And you just go surface level, right?
Yeah.
So for my generation, it's so much easier, and I love what the point you're making
Yes.
is to be vulnerable and to just put all our cards there.
Yeah.
Now for good or bad, because there's also a lot of bad.
Yes.
But what we need to start trying to get brands to do is to show the inside of the organization. Don't be afraid to go into depth and be vulnerable, because that's where people are going to buy into.
Experiment a little bit, there's parameters, but it's almost like with our parents' generation, they're now using cell phones. We're almost teaching them what's the correct way to, no, don't click on this link because someone's going to steal your money. I almost feel that your generation is also teaching us a little bit about pushing boundaries and trying new things, and which I really think is so important for a workplace, because we get so stuck in our HR policies, ways of work, and you almost need this bit of disruption, but it comes with a bit of uncomfortable feelings. Everybody is not always open to it.
Two of the things I always say just regarding this topic is, one is, if everyone agrees with your strategy, then it's not a strategy.
Yes, wow, there's something wrong then probably. Hey?
Because it's just too easy and convenient, not pushing the boundaries.
Has to be diverse.
And the second thing is, we know that 50% of our marketing is wasted. We just don't know which 50%.
Yeah.
So there will always be a loss, but if you're not testing and taking a chance, then you're not going to get any result.
No. Okay. Now, I'm Gen Z looking for employment. As an employer, we talk about employee value propositions. We talk about brand. You just spoke about you've got to put your brand out there. You've got to be having podcasts and so forth. Where are Gen Zs is essentially looking for employment. And why I'm asking that question is that employers need to understand where they need to go and cast and go and find their top talent.
So what's the three most important things to Gen Z when considering a job is, number one, flexibility.
Okay.
Number two is career growth. And then the last thing is actually salary. And so, of course, the lower the LSM you get, the higher the salary need is, right? Because they need the money more desperately.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at the middle kind of average person, like population, they they're actually looking for flexibility. And I'll tell you why. Because what COVID made a lot of people realize when we paused is how important our health and how important our families are. And so if I can't support my family through black tax, or if I can't go to take my mom to the doctor or pick up my child,
no.
that is fundamentally a no to me making a decision.
Yeah.
The second thing is if I can't see potential growth, whether that's changing roles, so Gen Z change roles they want to change roles every 6 months.
Okay.
And within 2 years, the average young person actually leaves an organization.
Yes.
And so that staff turnover is so high and costing the business so much.
Exactly.
You know, Wamley and France always say that the average employee costs a business 83,000,
yes.
including training and, you know, onboarding and all that. And so if you're constantly losing young people, you're costing your bottom line. And so how do we navigate that? Well, we look at our culture. How are we creating better culture from a mentorship point of view, from an onboarding point of view? Ideally, they want to come into work 3 days a week.
Whoa,
so
wow.
Actually, there's a misconception that, oh, no, they want fully digital. No. They believe if they come into the office and they build a relationship with their boss, there's a high chance they're going to be promoted.
Wow. Okay. And want some FaceTime. And it's great that you're doing this, because I must say there is a misconception. You know, we hear and see things which aren't obviously true as well. And in your data, you actually asked one question. You said, what is the top reason for accepting a job offer if it meets your salary expectations?
Yes.
Now we know that. Top one, career growth, actually. Hey? So career growth, followed by flexibility, as you said, job satisfaction and culture. Now, the problem just with flexibility is our legalistic system we've got in South Africa. Do you foresee that, I mean, that companies would really have to think about how they contract and how their policies are prescribed? But gosh, and it doesn't stop there, because it actually goes to a legislative level, actually, if you look at that, hey?
I was speaking to an MTN executive literally last week, and she's living in Mauritius, London, while working for MTN Global.
Wow.
So she is running a South African team, but she's not even living in this country.
Exactly, yeah.
So her contract is also very interestingly structured. Another MTN friend of mine, he works part-time for MTN while he runs his consulting practice. So like there's so many more of these very flexible contracts that we're seeing. Because of globalization, you can literally be sitting in an island
anywhere,
working for a company in South Africa
100%.
or vice versa.
Yeah.
One of my favorite companies is called CFO 360, and they've got a massive audit and accounting company, and a lot of their clients are in the UK, and they're beating companies in the UK because of price, because of the exchange rate. They're using that. So, you know, through platforms like Stitch and all these different fintech companies allowing, I mean, Revolut as a business example, it's just changing the game.
But being mature, so it takes a bit of maturity. You know, you again. Correct. So the perception is we've got a bunch of youngsters that's coming into the workforce that are just on LinkedIn and social media the whole day. They don't take life seriously. Now I need to create more flexibility in my employment practices. How can I trust these new generations? And may I ask you, you know, how can you give confidence to our audience, for instance, to, you know, we always speak about the grind. You know, you've got to earn your right. It's changed now, obviously, with employment. You know, they want fast career growth. But how can you set our audiences at peace, knowing that these employees are going to enter and they're going to give you massive dedication and growth?
Yeah, look, there's still fundamentally has to be a process, right?
Yes.
That they have to go through, a journey that they have to go through to earn that flexibility. And so I think that there needs to still be very dedicated systems and of career mapping. And also that they have to prove, you know, themselves. But I think once they have proven themselves, let's say after 5 years or 3 to 5 years, whatever, starting to ease off and being very flexible, which companies don't do.
Yeah.
You know, they're very, very, this is the one way, this is the only way. And so, yeah, I mean, in our work readiness programs that we help companies do, it's like spending time refining the expectations of young people, because their expectations are also so high, or because they're watching TikTok, they think that now they can just travel the world.
Exactly.
So it's kind of working through that and just finding ways to just create connection, whether it's on the paddle court or whether it's spending time outside of the office, finding ways that they can, again, a big problem is self-awareness, because most young people are just choosing career paths that either for the financial elements or because the world and their parents are telling them, and they actually don't enjoy it, you know.
Yeah. Work readiness, you've said something now so interesting. What are you guys doing there?
Yeah, so essentially a company will have a work readiness program, and they'll essentially say, for the next 6 months, we're going to take you through formal kind of education, whether that's exposing you to the different elements of the business or bringing in different thought leaders, etc. And so we kind of have been doing a bit of work with how do young people enhance their negotiating, their public speaking,
Sure.
their technology, their EQ and SQ aspects, but also just literally getting into the business, understanding the different parts and how can they be exposed. So they've got for example, in Vestec, they allow some of their grads to go to London and spend time in their London office. And so it's like these rotations almost. And so personal mastery is a big part of what we do as well. It's spending time doing psychometric testing, understanding who you are, working through your goals, working through your career challenges, potential weaknesses.
How does that look like? For instance, did you call, for instance, say
Yes.
we've got an intake of learners that's going to be starting shortly, and Marko, we want you to plug into the system and we want you to
Yes.
complement whatever theoretical and technical
Correct.
skills that we're learning.
So the first thing we always do is we'll do an audit. So we'll say, okay, cool, what does it currently look like? What are the processes? What are the people involved? How does the end result look like? What are the outcomes? Then we'll do some research. So we'll have a workshop with the young people. We'll actually get you research from surveys to them
Sure.
specifically. Then we take that research, we go into an executive workshop. So we actually spend time with the executives. Then we take all that research and we put it together in a report and share it with you guys to say, this is what the young people are saying, this is what all the management people, how do we find the different points of conflict and then create a solution for that?
Amazing.
And then spending time with the young people actually saying, these are the expectations, this is where the business is going, how can you kind of engage and bridge that gap?
Okay.
So a lot of it is using data to enhance, like I said, the friction points and the different parts of the business. You're using the internal kind of systems you guys have already built.
Love that. And I must say, in my preparation, so I've spoken to many generations. I wanted to get a very diverse perspective of what was going on. And it kind of felt to me that my audience had the impression that the Gen Z population was a little bit pushy. They want to come into a workplace and they want you to change how you're going to be operating. Is that the case, or is it a misconception?
No, I think that is true.
Okay.
Because they have more options than ever before.
Yeah, okay.
So if you think about it before, you were limited to your location. If you find a job in that location, you were stuffed.
Yeah.
Now, because I have globalization and I can even run my own business, I have my own side hustle. So one of the things we always say when I do my master classes is say, raise your hand if you have a side hustle. And majority of people, whether they admit it or not, have a side hustle because they realize that from interest rate and inflation, it's actually so hard to just rely on your salary. And so how do businesses now navigate people working elsewhere as well, which is another conversation. But
I'm going to ask you a few questions on that. I can see our audience sitting up straight now. All of a sudden, you're making them very uncomfortable.
But a big thing is there's just more options than ever. And so businesses kind of have no option to adapt.
It's like, I spoke to a guy this weekend. They do printing, so very traditional printing still. They do for all your fast food franchises. They do printing for those. And back in the day, it looked like one of their biggest markets was automobiles, so selling secondhand cars. And I said to him, wow, that's gone. We're not doing that anymore. And but you can see how they've evolved, and that there was a time and place for that, and they've evolved into something new. And I always get the sense that that's what employers are going to have to do. We can have this sentiment of Gen Zs, we'll just keep them out. If you don't like it, I'm not going to employ you. But the reality is, I've now got 10 vehicles that I'm watching. I can choose which one I want to buy, proverbially speaking now, essentially. And that's what it comes down to, I mean, options are just
and adapting
much
our culture, so much of it is fundamentally building curiosity, building leadership, building connection. And unfortunately, as society as a whole, we've lost that.
Yes.
We're in a connection crisis. Loneliness, 73% of young people feel lonely sometimes or all the time. And that's across all generations where we are more disconnected than ever. Cell phones and devices, we have these, addiction points.
Yes.
And so we're having to reset our process of building relationships. And that's where I think the older generation needs to step in and put boundaries in place to say, okay, in a meeting, one of the things I speak about is this concept versus spin versus pace. So spinning is when you're just constantly doing tasks, but they're not really kind of going to any outcomes. So a lot of corporate is that. You're just spinning the whole time. You're just following a to-do list. You're just doing meeting after meeting after meeting. Whereas pace, like let's say you're running a marathon, you pace yourself. So a lot of young people don't pace themselves. They join a company and they just go 100% at it and then they burn out. Same with corporates. They just burn out. And so we're trying to figure out how do we actually be productive and what is all the productivity for? Asking yourself, what is this all for? Where's this all going? Why are we doing this? Not, culture is not just something that we put on the wall. It has to be something real. What is the why behind this team, this division, and this business? And so re-spending time with Gen Z on that, because half of them time they don't even know why they're there. So I think leaders can do a really good job of disposing information and purpose around that. And that's where businesses need to spend more time from a cultural element to say, if your work is becoming where you find relationships, whether it's romantic or social, how do we then curate spaces for that? And then how do we put boundaries in to say, when we're in a boardroom meeting, no phones, all the phones are out, no distractions, and you fully are present doing that work. And I think, and maybe you can have a comment on this, but just doing meeting after meeting is not productive.
Senseless,
you know?
yeah. And we almost need somebody to say, wow, let's just think about what we're doing here at this moment. You and Francois chatted about, Francois from Wamley chatted about gig employment. So for our older generations here, I might just need to say, so traditionally you would start with a job, you only allowed to work for that employer. I mean, coming from a legal background myself, I know our contracts typically say you don't moonlight, you don't do anything else for anybody else. I want to know everything about your entire life. We're saying that Gen Zs, it's like, this is not going to work.
Absolutely not. So there's freelance platforms called Fiverr and Upwork that I've personally been using since I was 14 years old. People sitting in India, Pakistan, Netherlands, Ukraine that I've been using as executive assistants, as designers, as financial model builders, as accountants. And so those people have multiple clients in multiple locations, all through this platform. Most of the time it's dollar-based. And so I can literally hire someone for $5 an hour to do work. And so more and more young people are acting as freelance gig economy workers and also using the gig economy to build their businesses. And so we've seen a huge rise in that. And also, if I speak about the creator economy, so streaming, YouTube, if you ask your children, most of the people want to be creators now and influencers. So there's a huge, I mean, I recently did a talk last week and the guy was saying, there's 23 million South Africans using TikTok and the creator economy is worth something like $3.8 billion in South Africa. And so that's only growing where real money is being deployed to YouTubers and to people who have got social media. And that is so hard to accept and foreign to so many parents and people watching this to say that actually you can be full-time doing this.
100%. Or even it's a little bit uncomfortable, I in one of the last CCMA cases I was involved with, assisted my client, and my client was one of the HR reps. And after the CCMA case, she took a phone and took a selfie and said, I rocked it at the CCMA today. And I thought, should you be doing this? And that's by default. I'm just thinking, but now I'm thinking Gen Zs understand and appreciate the fact that your personal brand has so much value. I'm going to want to punt that. Do you see friction and conflict coming with employers there? Where we
I think there is. I mean, one of the examples I give is there was a video on TikTok that went viral because a Facebook employee did a day in the life. And she literally did no work during that day. She was literally going to the bar and
showing what everything she's doing.
And she got fired 2 weeks later because that's not a reality of what Facebook looks like to work at Facebook. And she did no work. And so more and more young people need to be careful about what they're showcasing. But at the same time, it's being used in the workforce so powerfully, like we spoke about, that you kind of can't stop it and you shouldn't stop it. You should actually encourage it.
I should promote it, give safe spaces for people to collaborate and stuff like that.
Exactly like what you're doing now. Say, okay, cool. If you want to have a podcast, do it under the company branch.
Let's do it.
Come and chat about it. If you want to do interviews, come do it here. And then, let us edit it and give you that space. And so I think that young people are frustrated by that. And it is a big trend we're seeing where more and more social media work influencers are coming on the scene, and even before this, like we spoke about the legalities of this podcast. The thing is, once this goes out, Sora is going to be able to duplicate this in so many ways. People in China now, you're not going to sue and take legal action on all of that. So the content is so cross-pollinated that actually it doesn't actually matter. Once you've shared it, it's out there, and so.
But employment used to be like control, it's the master servant principle. It's this contract, and you give your life to me, and then in 15 years you retire. You move on. That is not the case. And what I'm hearing from you as well is, what I'm hearing is already from an employment perspective, I've got to make it nice and slick to attract my people. To potential talent that wants to come to us, I must make it really attractive in terms of what are we as a brand. It's not just the advertisement. It's about what are we saying. Are we the Adrian Gores, for instance? and it's about contracting. Our Gen Zs want flexibility. So they are entrepreneurial, maybe more so than previous generations, and they are aware of those opportunities. Are the legal departments going to have to say, listen, we need to find a compromise here? Yes, traditionally we didn't allow this at all. We're going to have to find a medium halfway. Okay.
And linking it to South Africa and why passion behind South Africa, I believe that Silicon Valley every single day is becoming less and less valuable as a location. Why? Because of globalization and the internet and AI, we can no longer are reliant on this massive economy and network effect. The network effect is now on LinkedIn, where I can just, by association, get opportunities, where Silicon Valley's core power was because of the network. Because everyone was disrupting and everyone was collaborating, that happened. Whereas now I can actually, as a South African business, join Y Combinator or work in London or work in New York and get opportunities. And so I'm so excited about the internet and what it's doing for South Africans, because more and more underprivileged people and the inequality gap will close, because those people now, when we lose the monopoly of data and airtime, will have access to the world stage. And that creates opportunity and abundance, but it also creates competition, because now South Africans are being pulled to work for companies all around the world. So if you're not competing on a global scale, you will lose that talent pool.
That little fish pool has become a massive ocean now. So, and really tough. I think not all employers have the capabilities to do podcasts and to run social media. I think about traditional employment places, how would they keep up? But they're going to have to.
I would disagree with that in the sense that if you just have your phone,
you see what I'm thinking.
Any smartphone you can pull up. So you don't need this fancy setup.
In
All
fact,
you need is your smartphone and literally to create organic content like that. And let me tell you, that content is some of the most viral content.
That is
versus, and people always tell me, Marko, but I don't know what content to create, or it's too difficult, it's too expensive, and it's all just excuses.
Second person telling me that now.
Accountability is just to take out your phone and shoot content. When I started as a commentator, using other people's stories to commentate and commenting on Gen Z. And now I went from commentator to creator, and now creator to actually someone who's pouring back into the ecosystem through Genlink. And so, there's literally no excuse. If you're young, if you're old, if you're starting out, if you're working.
It's actually easy.
I mean, if you're a real estate agent and you're not posting on social media, it is totally your fault if you don't have unlimited deal flow and you're not, doing well.
Wow, amazing. Now, Gen Zs have lots of options. They're not going to be sticking around for 15 years and waiting for that promotion. They're going to be going around the world twice by then, for instance. Employers invest quite a lot of time and energy and money in things like learnerships, in things like training. How do we satisfy employers in knowing that they would be investing, but there would be a substantial return on investment as well? With knowing that Gen Z is what they stay about 2 years and then they'll find another job. How do you balance those two?
I think you balance it by saying, if you don't do it, what is the result?
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yes, but that's it's a hostage.
It's a very direct approach, but I think that the world is changing too fast. And if you just don't have an intervention, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you're just starting that process. And I think a lot of organizations are doing it well. I'm not here to sit and to say, no one is connecting to Gen Z and there's this massive gap. No, there are a lot of organizations that are doing it well, but we can constantly be improving. And a big thing, and I'll say it again, is the TTF. How much time to fund is there? Thinking about, should we be splitting the cost of our salaries into the first and the last part of the month? What do their actual employees want? Do they want to be paid weekly maybe? Even just thinking about that. And yes, it will affect our accounting, but is it worth it? And so how much is that person really worth to the business if they leave?
So we've got the G20 summit coming now. You spoke about you spoke very fondly about wanting to help leaders and help entrepreneurs in South Africa. Speaking about South Africa as well, is South Africa still a place where Gen Zs would want to work? And is it an economy that Gen Zs want to support?
So unfortunately, from a hierarchy of needs point of view, safety is so high. So until we fixed our safety problem, so many South Africans will constantly be leaving because they just don't feel like safe, especially from a woman point of view. If they can't walk and they're so scared of all the different challenges that we have, then it's a big disadvantage. So one of the things we're trying to do is, how do we, number one, fix safety? How do we create abundance of opportunity for all, not only the high LSM, but the low LSM? So, I mean, if we look at Bank Zero, that Lutsaka Technologies just bought, their whole plan is to try and see how we can disrupt the township economy. So a lot of our work is trying to see how do we create opportunities. There's another business called Wi-Fi. It's a data and airtime business. Again, township economy. So we've got to fix the township economy, but also simultaneously invest in collaborative efforts like the South African Future Trust, like the G20.
Yes.
One of the things I'm constantly doing is different entrepreneurship programs, whether it's EO or YPO, and really pouring back more than capital. I actually think there's a lack of good businesses, not capital. And essentially what we need is introductions, practical interventions, more media coverage and attention on these businesses. So it's real introductions like that. And one of my skill sets, I believe, is I'm a connector. And so whether it's having this podcast and connecting other people to it, or just other businesses or making private equity deals, that is where I'm going to make a real difference, more than just being on this platform.
And there's an element, it's not just about yourself. We've got to work together, collaborate together to make this a better country. Last question I have. So we're going to have like 20 episodes. We need to do a series with this. But, 21 years old, you've achieved so much, and I really want to congratulate you on that. Gosh, at 14, you were doing... I was waiting to be able to afford flowers for my girlfriends, to put it in perspective. But you've got a very a grounded way of seeing life and trying to share that knowledge, which is amazing. But how does Marko Stavrou deal with success and failures?
I deal with it by having a really strong community, being grounded. I'm quite religious, I'm Christian, and so, those elements are very, very important to me. And all of this is, number one, I'm going to die, so none of it actually matters. And two is, every day, am I living for myself or living for other people and serving other people? And I think that failure is... you learn more from success than failure. I think there's this whole thing about, you learn so much from failure. No, failure is hard and it sucks. And what I learn more from is when I succeed and people give me validation on things I'm doing well, and keep doing those things and building that momentum. And so, I think my ability to fail, my ability to get knocked down and to constantly be reaching out. One of my investors says, I'm just like this hungry dog, constantly just seeking opportunity and constantly seeking. And that's what you have to be like. You have to humble yourself and literally ask for opportunities and follow up, And I want to end on this stat, which is 80% of sales happen on the 5th to the 12th contact. It takes you 5 to 12 times to have touch points to actually close the deal. And if I look at that every single day on my wall in my office, it's a very, very real thing, and it helps me to realize what it actually takes.
Amazing. And I think living in a connected and social media world, we only see the beautiful things. Everything is what other people want it to look like. And I think for Gen Zs also just understand we're also here. We also grow and and go through that, and mentorships. Choosing right mentorships, and I think for you also being a mentor for those people is just incredible. I think more people should do it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Yeah, really nice. Thank you for your time. To our viewers, tune in for episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with Marko. But thank you, and as always, like and subscribe so you can see when we publish new content. And just always thank you for our guests that are always so humble and willing to share their knowledge and expertise with us. Keep well. Bye.